It's recorded.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, everyone. So, we're going to start the event tonight now. And my name is Barbia, and I'll be the host. So, we're going to start things off with a short Quran presentation by Muhammad Warfa. So, you can come up.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح المصباح في زجاجة الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة زيتونة لا شرقية ولا غربية يكاد زيتها يضيء ولو لم تمسسه نار نور على نور يهدي الله لنوره من يشاء ويضرب الله الأمثال للناس والله بكل شيء عليم.
Thanks for the recitation, Muhammad. Alright, so I would like to introduce our speaker for the night, and his brother AbdelRahman Murphy. And AbdelRahman Murphy, he's a graduate of the University of Illinois Chicago, and he's received his bachelor's degree in teaching both English and religious studies. He's currently pursuing his master's degree in mental health counseling. He has served as a youth director, Muslim chaplain, and assistant imam in a full-time capacity since 2009. While growing up in the Chicagoland area, he spent 2 years studying at al-Nasai Institute, and while finishing his university studies, he benefited directly from the training and teaching of our very young Professor Omer Mozaffar in the area of Quranic and texts of Iman. After graduating from UIC, AbdelRahman moved to Dallas, where he began reading classical texts with Sheikh al-Nasai, and in 2014, he formally graduated from the Qalam Seminary's one-year program. Currently, he's continuing his study of Quran and Imam al-Ghazali texts with Professor Omer Mozaffar, and is working to complete his coursework of the Dars and Nizami directly with Sheikh al-Nasai. Without further ado, AbdelRahman Murphy.
Sorry, nice. Does that work out for the golf clap? Appreciate it. So, alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man tabi'ahum bi ihsan ila yawmi din. Allahumma la ilaha illa anta. You can just face the table the whole time. That's all. The gym to be a lecture. I asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah, to purify our intentions, give us proper perspective on why we're here and allow us to benefit, inshallah, from everything that we'll be hearing, inshallah, and things that I'll be saying and we'll be talking about. How are you? I'm actually going to just go sit down because the auditorium is kind of like facing towards the opera. Everyone's going to get a really sore neck by the end of the night. Looking over there. Alhamdulillah, everyone okay? Yeah. Okay, one person's okay. Great. So, it's really good to be back from Chicago. It's so interesting. I'm like really like Chicago, like born and raised. Not really Chicago, Hoffman Estates, but people now, like I've been out of Chicago for so long that it's come to that like critical mass where people don't know that I grew up here. And so I people reach out to me and stuff. They're like, "Oh, will you ever come visit Chicago?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably." They're like, "Why? When? Where?" And I'm like, "My mom's house." Like, I don't know, like when she makes spaghetti. I don't know. So really good to be back. Alhamdulillah. This in particular, this NSA, my sister went to Loyola. eldest sister went to Loyola, so I have a lot of family history here. But beyond that, being here, alhamdulillah, obviously speaking under the supervision of Professor Omer, huge like moment and very, very nerve-wracking for myself. But alhamdulillah, always an honor to be with him. Been learning from him formally and informally for better part of a decade now, alhamdulillah. And you guys are very blessed to have him. You know, in Urdu they have a phrase, it goes something like, right? Which basically translates to the chicken of the house is just like lentils. And you can tell, first of all, that I'm hungry, but the second thing is that it's a phrase that basically gives the meaning that things that you're used to can be lowered qualitatively in value. And not because of them, but because of how you perceive them, right? So the house chicken can be considered lentils, even though, to the subcontinent, chicken is always better than lentils, although now, to a lot of millennials in Chicago, I don't know if that's necessarily true with their typewriters and mustaches. So anyways, a little history good for you. But the idea is that you never want to treat Professor Omer like house chicken, okay? He's better than house chicken, okay? He's Hari chicken, mashallah. So just always make sure that you think of him and treat him that way, inshallah. Never take him for granted. Because one of the things that can really destroy a person's relationship with somebody is when they take them for granted. And so make sure that as your teacher, as your mentor, as someone you look to on campus especially, that you make sure that you never ever lose that relationship. Tonight's discussion, before we begin our sort of like informal conversation about the topic of hasad, or envy, or nazar, as roughly translated, tonight's discussion is going to focus on the overall realm of the discussion of the heart. And what's interesting is that this discussion is probably the most often neglected discussion in our community, but at the same time, paradoxically, is the most important discussion. So it's the most neglected, but at the same time, most important. Why is it the most important? We're going to talk about that for the next 10 minutes, inshallah. How Allah Himself, how does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala Himself address the discussion of the heart, and why does it all come down to the heart? There is a very real, extremely real reality about the heart, and that is that it essentially acts as the control center behind every single thing that you do. Have you ever really wanted to do something but not been able to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah? Very one person. Okay, very good. The rest of you are liars, but one person is not. Okay, so we all have things that we want to do that we aren't able to do. We all also have things that we try to stay away from, but we all end up falling back into them, right? Has anyone been on a diet before? Yeah, especially during like wedding season, it's like game over, right? Like, I'm not gonna have carbs, and then they have 7 different kinds of biryani, and you're just like, how am I supposed to avoid this, right? So your heart is saying yes because it wants it. Everyone's heart wants biryani, but your mind, the cognitive process, the risk-reward debate that's happening internally, mentally you know all of the facts about eating that thing or doing that thing or not doing that thing. But the irony of it all is that that debate that's happening intellectually, cognitively, really is all in vain if the heart is not invested. And this is what Islam actually teaches us. So before we talk about the specific disease of hasad, before we talk about this specific ailment, we have to first lay the framework about where is this all taking place, right? What is the sort of what is the control of all this? Because if we're going to talk about hasad as a disease, we first have to understand the playing field, what's going on. So the heart itself, we're going to talk about the heart a little bit. The heart itself, when I talk about this, we're not talking about the physical heart. We're talking about the spiritual heart. What's the difference? Who knows?
One pumps blood.
Huh? One pumps blood. Thank you. Inshallah, very good. All right. Inshallah, being great answer. Okay. So one pumps blood. What does the other one do? Which one pumps blood? Physical or spiritual?
Physical.
Very good, thank you. You guys are all agreeing that. Maybe you should know this. It's kind of scary. Yeah, so one pumps blood. The other one is sort of a metaphysical reference. I'll give you an example. What do we say? What organ is in our skull?
Brain.
Very good. Okay, neurology control. Neurologists all do. Okay, brain is in the skull. But when something completely, totally just leaves you in a state of shock, what do you say? Mind what?
Blown.
Mind blown, right? Do you say brain blown? No, this sounds weird. You say mind blown. Are the brain and the mind the same thing? Are they related?
No.
Where's the brain again? Where's the mind? Is it? Maybe, right? That's one reference point. We say mind blown, so we're pointing to our head, right? But the idea is that your mind, right, is this sort of metaphorical, metaphysical entity that is not even tangible. So the spiritual heart, when the Quran, the Hadith, scholars, the religion, when they talk about the spiritual heart, when they say the word qalb or heart, they're not talking about the physical heart. They're not talking about the organ that pumps blood. They're talking about a person's essence, right? Their heart being the control center, the decision maker, as some of the scholars have said. Almost universally, every single religious tradition or philosophical tradition has had some reference to a heart-like entity, whether it's the heart, whether it's the soul, whether it's a person's existence, whether it's a person's relationship with the existences around them, even things like transcendentalism and even like non-sort of Abrahamic or I guess you could say Eastern religious philosophies have had this idea that there is sort of this essence that impacts people and that is impacted by people, right? So that fact in and of itself shows us the value of this. When something is time-tested and true over time, for thousands of years, there must be some sort of truth to its reality. So the heart has had that. And even in the English language, we have phrases that we use that reference this, right? What are some phrases that have the word heart built into it?
Heartbreak.
Huh? Heartbreak. Are you okay? You want to talk about it? We can talk about it. I mean, John's hard right there. Office hours, right? No, heartbreak. That's a good one, right? What does it mean when a person's heartbroken? Does it actually mean that their heart is physically broken? I mean, no. Okay? Their heart is not physically broken, otherwise there would be serious issues, right? Not to say that heartbreak isn't a serious issue, but there would be serious physiological issues. But what does heartbreak mean? Some sort of emotional trauma, disappointment, the last and most likely the second person in line, like that kind of thing, right? So like that's heartbreak, right? I don't want to go to romance because I know you guys are like just right for that. So there's heartbreak, broken-hearted. Okay, what else? What are some other idioms that we use?
Heartfelt.
Heartfelt. Very good. What does that mean?
It means it touches the heart.
Yeah, something that impacts the heart, touches the heart, maybe gives the person a more potent emotional reaction than a typical thing, right? So, like, if someone gives you food, that's nice, right? But if someone knows that you're sick and they come to your house and give you food, and they give you a certain kind of food that's good for your sickness, like chicken soup or something, right? Then that's really heartfelt. Like, you almost feel like, wow, this person, they completely and totally understood my situation. They put so much love into it, so much care and compassion, okay? Things like heart skip a beat. Does your heart actually skip a beat? Hopefully not, right? That could be, that could be a physiological issue, but when you see someone or something that you're excited about, you see my heart skip a beat, it's more talking about the feeling of excitement, and perhaps it feels like that, but again, not literal. Heart of gold. Sounds nice, but if physically real, it's also problematic, right? But what does heart of gold mean? What does heart of gold? Is this like a white thing? Is that only white thing? Heart of gold, anybody?
Very nice people.
Very kind, yeah, it could be like very generous, right? Lots of like honor, right? The heart of gold. And we have in different languages as well, right? They say in Arabic, right? The light of my heart. Not literal, but, and they even refer to people they love as qalbi, my heart. Like, I love you so much, I'm sorry, that you are my heart in existence, right? So in Arabic, or do you guys have anything? Anything with did? Anything?
Ready, John.
Ready, John. What is it?
Ready, John.
Yeah, very good. No, absolutely. You nailed it. Your mom loves it. That's beautiful. Alhamdulillah. So, okay, so we've established now the fact that historically the heart has been a topic that has been held with a lot of weight and esteem. Even linguistically, we talk about the heart, right? So socio-linguistically, we have idioms that we use that don't literally talk about the heart, but talk about this sort of like essence of what the heart represents, right? So all these phrases represent something, but they're not literally what those things are. Biologically speaking, right, there are immense miracles of the actual physical heart that prove to us that this thing has immense powers and capacities and capabilities beyond even what we perceive on first, inspection, right? So how many times does the heart beat during the day? Anybody know? Anyone take a guess?
Over 9,000.
Over 9,000? Okay. Very good. I like that. You're like more than 3. Yes. Gonna call me complicated. So on average, it beats 100,000 times a day. All of those beats are autonomic, right? So we have no sense of actually having to command our hearts to beat every time it beats. Carrying 100 gallons of blood per minute. Have you guys ever had to carry groceries for your parents before? Or for yourself, right? We'll stop talking about it in reference to parents. Have any of you ever been an adult and shopped for groceries? Yeah, right? So like carrying gallons of milk or like drinks that you bought, because it's a frustrating task because they're so heavy. Imagine the heart, that tiny muscle inside of you, can beat 100,000 times a day, and during the course of a minute can pump 100 gallons of blood, whose density, right, is thicker than water, meaning that it's heavier than water. Over a closed circuit, the entire circuit that is beating all this stuff over is how many miles? So all of your vessels, how many arteries, veins, all that added up, if you line it up in a straight line, how long would it be? I'll give you a hint, it's in miles.
10.
60,000 miles. You were close though. Closer than anybody else, so that's because no one else guessed. So, all of that done with this tiny organ. Alright? So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that verily inside of you there are signs. Right? Verily in you there are signs. That's why we look at this also from the physiological, biological perspective, which is that in this existence of the heart, there are signs for us to reflect about what? About how there are hidden capacities that we have no idea about, but it's happening all by the will of Allah. Now, where is your heart? Right here, right? Is it like on an extremity? Is it like on the end of your hand? Is it on top of your head? On the bottom of your foot? No, it's right here. This area right here. Does this feel like a protected area or a vulnerable area? Protected, right? Like when you have something, like you got the brand new iPhone, right? It's coming out, iPhone 7, along with Iman, okay? Who has Android? Anyone have Android? No, for you. Okay, so when you get like something that you really love, right? Like you really love it. I've actually seen this when I worked at the Apple store. I've actually seen like when young kids go, it's their birthday or it's like Christmas or some sort of holiday, and their parents buy them something, like they'll actually walk out of the store like this. Like clutching their new materialistic thing that won't even happen in 3 weeks. They're clutching it. That was a little like pessimistic joke. They're clutching it against their chest. Why? Because they're literally holding it close to their heart. But also because like they're afraid of dropping it, right? And so the sign of security, right, of safety, when we want to protect something, we hold it close. There's much more we have like a young family with a baby here. Like you see this a lot. I was just at Umrah like 3 days ago, alhamdulillah. And you see all these parents when they're doing Umrah, they carry their children like this. Or they have those baby like wraps, right? Those like crazy baby wraps, and they put the child right here. Why? Because this is a space, this is a maqam of safety, this area, right? And it's so interesting that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He designed human being, when God designed us, He placed the heart right in the area of what was represented to us of safety. And it's under so many layers, right? So it's under the layer of bone, fat, muscles, skin, there's tissue, right? There's all these things there. It's not on the top, it's not protruding, it's actually buried away, tucked away. When something is in a safe place and it's tucked away, what does that show about the fragility of that thing? Is it fragile? Yeah. Is it sensitive? When things are sensitive and fragile, do you just leave them out? No, you keep them safe, right? So again, Allah says, in you there are signs. So we think about this, we look at ourselves and we say, okay, I know that the heart has immense power and capacity, but at the same time, it's immensely sensitive. It's super sensitive and very fragile. It can be twisted, shaped, broken, right? As the brother mentioned, broken hearted even. So one of my teachers, he actually drew the analogy that the heart is like a glass. And actually throughout the history of Islamic tradition, like the intellectual tradition, it actually uses this analogy that the heart is like a glass. It's strong enough to hold things like hot liquids, right? Like a tea glass, you can't just pour hot water on your hand, you hurt yourself. But if you have a tea glass, it seems very fragile. You can just take it within a second and crack it and break it. But it's strong enough to carry that hot liquid. The heart is the same way. It's strong enough to process. It's strong enough to contain things like Iman, things we believe in Allah, things like morals and virtues and ethics, but it's also fragile enough to be broken. It's fragile enough to be infected by diseases like the disease that we're going to talk about tonight, inshallah, called Hasad. Now, from a spiritual perspective, we talked about this, we haven't even mentioned one ayah really, or any hadith. This is all just like reflection. But now we're going to go into the scripture. And the importance of this is that there are moments and realizations that you can have through your own intellectual volition, but there are things, there are places and spaces you will not be able to reach with your own thought, right? And the reason why that is because no person possesses ultimate intellect. So when we reach the end of our intellect, that's when we jump over to revelation. Like reason should lead us to that revelation. So now we go to the Quran, now we go to the Sunnah of the Prophet, and we say, okay, what did Allah and His Messenger say about this? Because all of what we thought about on our own. But now we want to get like the hidden understanding, right? The sort of developer's version of this, okay? Allah talks in the Quran about the heart being the processor of Quran. I want you to understand this. What does that mean? The heart is the processor of Quran. What does that show us about the heart and the Quran? Is the Quran important? Yes or no? The baby's answering before anybody else. The baby's closer to the Quran. Is the Quran important? Yes or no? Yes. Excellent, mashallah. Candy for everybody. Okay, Sunday school. Quran is important, right? Why?
It's a way of life.
Okay, well, it provides us with a guideline for the way of life, okay? What else?
It's guidance.
It is guidance, very good. What else?
Word of Allah.
It's the word of Allah. Okay, very good. What else?
It's meant to make us better people.
Okay, it's designed to better the human being, right? To make Islam, to purify, to rectify our issue, our affairs. What else? Why is the Quran important? You guys don't remember probably as your chaplain. Quran's like his thing, like his jam, mashallah. It's like on his playlist. So like his Spotify playlist is just Quran. Right? Okay. Why is the Quran important? You whispered it really loudly, so I call me.
It's the words of God.
Very good, it's the words of God, right? And in that meaning, right, it is the tacit, very direct connection that a human being has with Allah. Now, can a human being, have you asked the question before? Can a human being have a connection with Allah without the Quran?
Yeah, probably not.
You have it, right? Yeah. That's like these like things, like second class, like second or third class. And can a human being have a connection with Allah without the Quran? The answer that you eventually come to is yes, theoretically. But the Quran provides the premium, prime, perfect relationship that a person can have with their Creator. So that's why the Quran is important. Now, what does the Quran say about the heart? Processing the Quran? Allah says, أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ الْقُرْآنَ. He asks this question, very powerful question. He goes, don't they think about the Quran? Don't they ponder about the Quran? أَوْ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبٍ أَقْفَالُهَا. Or is it the case that on their hearts there is a lock? So the first thing we learn about the importance of the heart is that the heart is the thing that allows us to understand, to comprehend. And when we say understand, we typically think of this, right? Comprehension, understanding. Islamic tradition says no, comprehension, understanding. And this verse shows us that. That the Quran shows us that if the person's heart is not in a good state, they won't be able to understand this message. That's why you have people like Daniel Pipes, who probably knows Arabic better than most of us in this room. You have people who have studied, Orientalists who have studied this religion through and through, but their understanding of the Quran is not like ours. You know, subhanAllah, there's this one auntie, you know Tarawih aunties? They're like superheroes. Like, we should actually make a comic book called Tarawih aunties. Just a band of 7 aunties doing the front row every day on the lawn, right? So, there was this one auntie, okay, and this happened at IFS, it's promise you the true story. It's really, really interesting. So, Iman Faisal was leading, right? Faisal's like a, mashallah, like a local celebrity, becoming actually like world renowned. Actually, whenever I travel, like, there's this guy, no one really knows much about him. But his name's Faisal, he's from Chicago. I was like, Faisal, yeah, I know Faisal. They're like, oh, let me touch you. You know, he's getting really popular, mashallah. So, anyways, so he leads, Tarawih and IFS. When I was growing up, that's where he would lead. So IFS has the staircase for the ladies section that comes down and meets kind of the main foyer area. So I remember this one auntie during Tarawih, I remember going out there and just seeing that she was in such an emotional state. You know, after Tarawih was over, she was so emotional. Like, she had just cried, and she was just, you can tell she was very like raw, right? Whatever was being recited, like it hit her. And I remember the first night that I saw her, it was a discussion about like the afterlife and Hasad and accountability, and Allah asking a lot of rhetorical questions like, what have you done? You know, Iqra kitabak, kitab nafsik. Allah says, read your own book. That will be a sufficient enough case for you on that day. Very powerful verses. So when I saw her, she was in an emotional state, she was crying, I was like, makes complete sense. You know, she was if you understood the message that was being, it was very, like, it rattles you. The next night, Tarawih ended, and I go and I see, and she's in that same emotional state. And I thought to myself, what verses will be recited tonight? And it was the verses of marriage. And I was like, oh, interesting. I wonder if, like, maybe her kids are having trouble getting married. I don't know, maybe she went through a divorce. I was like, trying to figure out, like, why is she emotionally feeling it? Next night, same thing, very emotional, but it was like the verses about, like, inheritance. And I was like, maybe someone passed away. Like, I was trying to think, like, what's emotionally stimulating her? And then the next night, it was talking about, like the divisions of, like, crops and animals. And I was like, okay, this is just too far. I don't know why she's trying that. Like, she's reached some level of understanding that I will never get to. So I actually, next time I asked her, I said, Auntie, like, is everything okay? And she goes, it's so beautiful. That's all she did. It's so beautiful. I said, yeah, it really is, mashallah. Like, what's your favorite part? She goes, well, I don't understand any of it. It just hits my heart. I just hear it and it just hits my heart. Right? But then you have people who understand. I mean, think of Shaitan's story. The case study of Shaitan is fascinating. Because here you have somebody, an individual, okay, who knows everything that we doubt. He's experienced everything that when we're in our deepest, darkest moments, we say, does anything really exist? He's experienced it. He's met Allah. He's talked to the prophets. He sees, when we're doubting, he sees us and he laughs like, he was there when the Quran was being revealed. Right? Jibreel going down to the earth. And he still disbelieves. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, right? Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that this example, this verses, this book, it misguides and it guides. How can the same thing misguide somebody and guide somebody? Isn't it the same thing? You give the Quran to one person, they become misguided. You give the Quran to another person, they become guided. Is it because of the Quran? What's the variable? Is it the person or is it the book? It's the person. And even deeper than that, it's their heart. So, if anyone here has ever had, be honest, have you guys ever had trouble understanding the Quran? Not Arabic, but like reading the message and understanding it? Have you ever had questions, things that didn't make sense to you? Oftentimes, I'm going to level with you. When I had those same concerns, and Professor Omar can tell you, like, he met me at that time, right? When we have those concerns about the Quran, the message, that doesn't make sense to me. That seems illogical. That seems backwards. That was for a different time. Oftentimes, we become so distant from ever critiquing ourselves, our mental or spiritual state, and of course, the only thing left to critique is the book. But what the Quran says to us is before you come and critique the book, which by the way, it allows you to critique it. It says go ahead and try to recreate a surah, recreate a verse, recreate something from it. The Quran allows that, but it says before you do that, make sure that you are in a position where you are even clean enough to come and critique the book. Your heart is even in a state where it has the capacity to do so, right? So the heart here, the number one purpose of the heart's existence is to understand the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And if we don't take care of the heart and let ailments like Hasad infect it, then that is at risk. The next thing I want to conclude before we start having this discussion about Hasad is the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad. And this is going to teach us the reality of the heart. The Prophet said in the hadith, إِنَّ فِي الْجَسَدِ مُضْغَةً إِذَا صَلَحَتْ صَلَحَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ وَإِذَا فَسَدَتْ فَسَدَ الْجَسَدُ كُلُّهُ أَلَا وَهِيَ الْقَلْبُ. The Prophet Muhammad said in the hadith that verily in the body there is an organ, a piece of material. And he said that if that thing is sound, everything else will be okay. But if that thing is corrupt, then it doesn't matter what that person does. Everything else will be corrupt. We've heard this hadith before, yes? Anyone heard it before? You know what's scary about this hadith? Is that it shows us that good intentions aren't the only thing that matters. You know, when we say this, like, oh, I have a good intention. I intend well. That's not all that matters. And actually, spiritually, although we use that excuse a lot, let's be real. Do good intentions matter in other realms of life? Are they the end all be all? You don't show up to class ever, right? Omer Mozaffar, mashallah, on his Facebook. If you ever want to see, if you're ever worried about your grades in class, just go check his Facebook wall. You're probably on there, right? You just don't know it, right? So, or not, I think you said you wait until semester after or something like that. He probably has a diary of all of you. So anyways, you don't show up to class ever, don't do any homework, show up on the last day, tell the teacher, you know, I really intended to get an A in this class. I promise you I did. It was right there. What's the teacher going to say? They're going to be like, great, take your attention and go ahead and show it to the, you know, like the person who you're supposed to get your phone from, right? See if they'll give it to you. They're not going to care, right? We think that in spiritual realms, our intention should be enough. You know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala actually gives us much more for our intention than the rest of the world does. The rest of the world is like, that's fine, you can intend all you want, but what are the results? Allah Ta'ala says, look, if you intend, then you'll get rewarded for it. But you at least have to put effort for it. Right? So this hadith teaches us, look, you can intend all you want, but if the effort isn't there, then you know what? You're not going to achieve what you want. The heart will not be able to do it. There are times where I want to wake up for Fajr. I actually want to, but I can't. I want to, but I can't. Why? Because even though I have the desire to, I haven't circumstantially prepared myself to do so. I want to wake up for Fajr, but I'm going to sleep an hour before Fajr comes in. Because I just watched House of Cards season 4, right? Like, what's pop, can't stop, right? So like, okay, circumstantially, I'm hurting myself. I want to be a better Muslim, but I'm not putting myself in a position to do so. Well, your desire and your want is nice, and inshallah, Allah will reward us for that, right? All of us. But if we don't actually think about, okay, well, the heart also has to be in a healthy state to produce the result, then you know what? Intention's not the only thing that's going to get us there. On the same realm, we might intend not to do something, but we can't stop doing it. Like chocolate, right? Like brownies. You're like, I need to stop eating brownies. Mentally, I understand your heart's like, oh, you're not going to stop eating brownies, right? Why? Because when your heart wants something, it wants what it wants, right? Sheikh Hasad Gomez, as she said. So it's really, really important. Spotify has ruined me, okay? Spotify shuffle has ruined me. So the point is that all of these things, as much as we're laughing and stuff, they have legitimate spiritual realities. And the only person, the only thing that can impact this is you. You know, no speaker that comes in from out of town, no parents, no sheikh, no this, they can't change you. They can't. Everyone is on their own when it comes to this stuff. That's why the purification of the heart is so dang scary. Because when you go home at night and you're by yourself in your room, and you know, there's a statement that one of the famous philosophers over he said, he goes, every person has three existences: the public, the private, and the real. Because you are who you are in public. And then you have an inner circle of the private people that you're cool with. But then when you're by yourself, you are who you really are. And that realization, when you see your heart for what it is, and you start to really inspect yourself, that's where you know where you are and where you have to go, and how you're going to get there. Right? And that's why this discussion, in Sunday school, we learn how to pray, what to say during prayer, how to fast, when to fast, how much zakat to give, the important things. But you know what? All of those ritual things, and I think in college you can probably understand this very well, all of those ritual things, if there's no engine, the heart behind it, it's all going to be just esoteric. There's no actual movement, there's no actual meaning. So now is the time, especially in this age where you're starting to be hit with all these different ideas and philosophies and ideologies. Now is the time to really discover what your heart is and the power that it has and the ability to connect with your creator, right? With that, inshallah, I want to invite our teacher and esteemed guest and sweater best wearer. Oh, tonight? No, it's gone?
They're gone.
Inshallah. The Mrs. G. From the house?
Yeah.
I understand. Well, that's for Coke, inshallah. Very nice. It's still kind of on the bill versus the piece of Coke versus Okay, so.
Alright, so now, so you've given us the stage, so now let's talk about Hasad, or first, why don't you tell us something about the diseases are?
So the diseases of, I mean, it's weird, because this is like someone taught me about this, but the diseases of the heart, generally speaking, as scholars have mentioned, are the vulnerabilities. Some scholars have even gone so far as to say that they are signs of a dying heart. So the heart basically has three states, right? One is alive and healthy, one is dead, okay? And in between is sick. And on that, they basically say that, the tradition says that the majority of people are in that middle state, right? So there are very few people who are alive and healthy, right? Spiritually alive and healthy. And there are a few people that are dead, their hearts are dead, meaning that beyond repair, right? But the overwhelming majority of people are in a state where their hearts are experiencing ailments. Now, just like with the body, when a person reaches, this is very personal because my wife's grandfather, who's going to go off inshallah, he's sort of approaching the end of his life. And what's interesting is that it just seems like every day there's like a new thing. So at first it was that he was having like intestinal issues, then it became that he was having pulmonary issues, couldn't breathe properly, then it became that he needed a blood transfusion, then something else happened. So it seemed like just one after one things were failing, right? And when we were talking about it, it just struck me so much that isn't this the case with the spiritual heart as well? That basically as the spiritual heart nears its death, because of overwhelming sickness, components of it begin to fail. And ailments and these diseases begin to show up. So if a person, for example, like they're nearing this very intense sickness of the heart where they're disconnected from Allah, their nourishment source, then they might begin to backbite a lot more. They might begin to lust a lot more. They might begin to envy people a lot more. And the more and more these things become prevalent and aware, then they become embedded as very serious diseases that a person has trouble then recovering from. So the diseases of the heart are basically indications to us. When we see these symptoms, when we see these signs, they act as indications that, hey, your heart is trending in the wrong direction, right? And that's where essentially the scholars say it come from.
So if most people are somewhere in the wrong sickness, then what are some common or big diseases of the heart that, for example, a college student might have to be concerned about?
What do you think? What do you think from the college students? I'm getting old. I'm almost 30. Oh shit, I feel so old, man. 30, I'm 55. Yeah. What are some diseases of the heart that college students are probably, because actually what's the one thing that's interesting about diseases of the heart, the scholars say, is that they never go away. They just change. And so when you're younger, you might have one disease, but as you get older, you might have another. An example, just for example, is that I never, when I was younger, had to worry about interest. Like I would hear footballs about interest. People taking interest loans, and I'd be like, oh, they're going to war with Allah. And I'd be like so vindictive about people taking interest, right? With no nuance on the legality. I would just be like, oh my God, right? Typical 14-year-old weekend seminar student. So then, as I got older and I'm buying a car, I look on the contract, I get it, I made my mom proud. I was Egyptian. So the guy was like, the car's gonna be $20,000. I'm like, $8,000? Not pay more. He's like, sir, it costs us $12,000 to get the car here. I'm not gonna give it to you. I'm like, I just start hitting the number 8,000. I'm just like, can't hear you with my finger tapping the table, right? So I negotiated very well. I think the guy officially hates listening to this content, right? But true story, I'll tell you actually about that. That's actually a very real risk that we run by being such incessant bargainers. Allah actually talked about it in the Quran, Mozaffar are two kinds of people. That when they buy, they want more. When they want more for less, when they sell, they want to get less for what people are buying for. Very interesting, right? So anyway, that was a joke. It was also sort of social commentary on our community. But I'm signing the paper and I see 1.9%. And I was like, wait a minute, what's that? He goes, that's your interest. And I was like, and I'm not going to answer any of the questions, I'm just saying for me personally, I was just not comfortable. And he was like, yeah, it's your interest. And I was like, but how much does it cost again? And he was like, oh no, the price we agreed on was there. It's just the way we work around it in the back, like in the back end of financial institutions. And at that moment, like maybe the disease of something else when I was younger, right, didn't impact me as much. Maybe lust wasn't really a problem, right? But now all of a sudden the disease changes. So when you hit diseases, when you hit different ages, different phases of life, different diseases become more prevalent, right? So you guys are college students, some of you maybe graduate level, some of you undergrad level. What are some diseases that you think are prevalent or relevant to your experience?
Or we can call them behaviors.
Envy.
Yeah, what are some behaviors that are a concern?
Envy.
Envy.
Envy, okay.
What else?
Everyone's like, no, we're pretty good with that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Just, a loose tongue.
Loose tongue.
Yeah, very good.
Thirst.
Thirst.
There's like physical or like romantic? Both.
A physical thirst for romantic.
The world is 2/3 water. People still thirsty. Okay, hate, very good. Both. Greed, very good. Pride, very good. These are all college related, you think?
Lethargy.
Yeah, there we go. I like that one. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it tomorrow, please. What else?
Jealousy?
Yeah? Hasad and jealousy. What about lust, pornography?
Mm-hmm.
Probably the disease of our era. Yeah.
Procrastination.
Yeah. Very
I
good.
like how you took a while before.
Yeah. You're like, I'll answer towards the end. Okay. Yeah, so these are things that are very much prevalent to the college student, right? And I think one of the things about being in college is particularly challenging is that you guys are very busy people. I mean, you have to get in your 2-hour nap. That's a must. That's number one, right? But no, really, in all honesty, you have a full load of classes. You have, maybe some extracurriculars that you're a part of or in charge of even. You have some semblance of a social life, right? Which actually is important because it's part of your health, right? It's part of your self-care. It's having friends, having a social life. My brother teaches at the MK, a lot of you probably actually took this class at some point before you went to do residency. And he used to tell the students, like, go hang out this weekend, go out, or you need some sort of self-care. So there's that, right? And so a lot of times when you're extremely busy, you're packed like end to end, it's hard to take time and reflect. I love flying airplanes. For the CIA who's listening, okay? Not like that, okay? I love flying airplanes. You know why? Because there's no cell phone signal. And to pay Wi-Fi is some ridiculous amount, like $19 for a flight. So it's like the only time where I'm completely disconnected. I love it. It's such a rare, unique feeling to be totally disconnected to the point now where you have to just sit and think. I think our society is suffering from an incredibly debilitating issue, which is that we don't have to just think about what we've done. Try it tonight before you go to sleep. Just lay down, put your phone aside, okay? Put it somewhere else. Don't have anything out, and just sit and go through your day. Just think about what you did. I woke up, I did this, I did that, and evaluate your actions. Just think about that. That's called Baraka in our tradition, like to go over it, to think, to reflect about, and to give yourself a grade. I guarantee you, for those of us who are trying to figure out where we are and how we get better, this is like the one thing that we have to do is just think about it. So college students have a very difficult time identifying and assessing and curing these ailments, particularly because they're busy people. Young parents, the same thing. After people get out of they start working, have kids, they come to me every week and say, I feel like my Iman is just rock bottom. And one of the reasons why is because the time is just such a premium. Right? So these are all diseases that I think that college students particularly suffer from. I think The number one, I'll say top three, definitely are backbiting, disease of the tongue. So it could be backbiting, it could be insulting other people, it could be saying horrible things to or about them, so backbiting, slander. I'll say definitely like the sexual diseases, so like lust, pornography, yeah, like just over like hypersexuality, let's say. And the third thing I think is often just complete and total neglect and even antipathy towards God, you know, which is compounded by a lot of other diseases, but I think that's the core of it.
They're usually the like the biggest one of all. So then speaking about envy, we can speak about these other three. First, let's start with the good side. What are the good envies?
Yeah, so the Prophet says that envy is forbidden, except for a few different kinds. The first is you can be envious of somebody who, he gives a couple of examples, but basically the same thing, which is you can be envious of somebody who gives money for the sake of Allah. You can be envious of somebody who gained knowledge, right, sought knowledge. You can be envious of someone who basically worships in a certain way or teaches in a certain way. So essentially, you can be envious of people who have attained a certain relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and are acting on that relationship. That's sort of the core of the end of the teaching, is that you're allowed to actually be envious of people in that way. But where envy becomes destructive, and this is actually problematic, you'll see why this envy is okay. You're like, why is this envy okay, but envy is not? Where envy becomes destructive is where it starts to go and to dive into people's like material belongings or their social standing or events that happen to them in their life. It's actually a really interesting story. I'm actually going to visit these people very soon. I was at the engagement party of one of my family friends. I was there as the token religious figure. You know, the Pope, so I was like, just sprinkling something on everybody. I'm like, why am I here? Like, the group just rode in on an elephant. I'm like, why am I here? So anyways, you know, I did the whole, like, we made a lot for them, and we prayed for them, and alhamdulillah, it was a nice gathering, and I kid you not, this happened. Are you ready? It was top 5 most awkward moments of my life, and I'm half Egyptian, so like, I have a lot of awkward moments, but we just finished making go out, and I lost my God, protect them, make keep them happy, give them a good life, give them, you know, buttercup, and they were married, blah, blah, blah. Really nice dua. They were about to serve the cake. It was like this vanilla cream mango cake. It was like super, super amazing. And one of the aunties in the room goes to the mother of the bride, or the female fiance, let's say, fiancette, and she says in front of everybody, I can't believe that you gave your daughter to him. She was supposed to be for my son. I was cutting the cake. And I would just look down, just keep looking down. 4-inch slices, everyone. I love that. I went over, started like doing all these like over them, and I was like, we need your protection now. Please help us. That was one of the most awkward, and that, you know, we laughed and we're sort of like all in shock, but how many of us can honestly claim that we haven't felt that thought before? She said it. She was bold. She was courageous. Right? On the R. But I would put money on the back of all of us in this room have at least thought something like that before. Why did that person get into the program? I got better grades than him. Why did they get married? I feel like I'm better looking than they are. How come he got that car? He's not like, you know, his dad's making money as my dad. Right? This is all, and it was all back to dad because the community is like, oh, you want to get cars with these? Right? It's never like, I say it doesn't always look right. We all have these thoughts, right? We all have these thoughts, and so she was just bold enough to like open up her world for us, but we all suffer from these things. And so the same reaction we just had to this sort of story, we should have that internally whenever we catch ourselves thinking that, right? So envy is one of these big, big diseases that can destroy people. But in certain cases, like the good side, you can envy people who have a connection with Allah that you really want. Right.
So then, suppose someone goes to your exercise and realizes, yeah, I feel this way, and I feel this way right now. What are some tips for what a person can do to help reduce it or cure it?
So the scholars mention three things. They mention symptoms, they mention causes, symptoms, and cures for every disease. So if you're looking at different books of Islamic spirituality, they'll talk about what are the causes of this disease. And before we talk about the treatment, it's important to know what we're treating, right? Because the cause itself is like, can be indicative of what, different treatments for different causes, basically, right? And the symptoms are also very interesting because some of them are not very explicit. For example, one of the signs of Hasad that they mentioned, which is profound because I know that I've felt this myself before, is when you're in the presence of somebody who's being praised and you feel frustrated. Anyone ever felt that before? And you don't know why. Like if I ask you, hey, are you jealous? You're like, no. But the person's like being praised and you're just like, right? Like, or they do it another level. They said when a person is being praised and you take away the praise from them. This is like Dawah practice number like 5. Someone's like, oh, mashallah, so-and-so. You're like, yeah, everyone gets lucky once in a while. Right? What do you say when you say that? You're not able to let a person be confident in front of you. The scholars say that's envy. Isn't that interesting? Right? So the symptom is not directly tied to it. Like, if I told you that symptom, you'd be like, oh, I don't know, maybe it's just, But once you realize it from the scope of envy, you're like, wow, that is envy. Right? That is a sign of envy. The person is unable to let praise be delivered to another person while they're in their presence. Because why? Because they want it themselves. So the different causes of envy, or the different symptoms are, like I said, a person cannot listen else to be praised, a person takes away from somebody else. One of the other symptoms would be that a person is constantly critical of other people, right? So they're constantly critical of even the good that people do. So someone might do something really well, and you always find a way to criticize the 1% of it. So they do 99% quality, and you're like, no, that was missing, right? That's another sign that could be indicative of envy. Iman al-Nasai actually gives a profound reasoning as to the cause of envy. A lot of us think that envy exists how? How would you define envy? Why does envy exist? What is it a sign of in a person?
Ingratitude.
Oh, interesting. How? How'd you get there?
Because they're only looking at what others have, and they're not looking at what they themselves have.
Beautiful. So both said ingratitude. So I asked him, how'd you get there? He said, because they're only focusing on what other people have, and they're not focusing on what Allah has given them. That's definitely one of the signs of envy, is that a person lacks gratitude of Allah. How often do I think about what I have instead of what other people have? Do any of you, when you go to someone's house, start looking at the things that they have? Just me? Okay, I'm awkward. All right. No, anyone ever seen that before? When you go to someone's house and you're just like, I remember when my wife and I bought our home, I kind of feel awkward by this. I don't know how you feel, but like when people are like, so give us the tour. I'm like, no. You're gonna sit here and eat, and you're gonna say thank you and leave. It's so strange when someone walks my house, like, show me your master bedroom. I want to see your bed. It's like, no, I don't want you to see that area. There's a reason why it's upstairs. So anyway, we have this very pervasive culture of like, let me see everything you have. Has anyone ever been asked how much they bought something for? By someone that's like not that level with you? Like there's people that are like, hey, how much did you get that for? You can tell them. But then there's people that are like, hey, how much was that? And you're like, it's beautiful weather outside today, isn't it, right? Or they'll say, how much do you make? Anyone ever been asked? At your job, like, how much do you make? Not how much does that job pay? So it's a little bit more classy way to ask that question. Oh, what does the industry pay for that? And the person, oh, this or that. But then there's people who are like, well, how much do you make? Pay stubs, let me see them, right? Like, you too. It's so strange, right? It's so ajib. Like, these are all very interesting symptoms of people wanting to be totally involved and aware of your life. And these things can trickle down to envy. Because what happens if you do the same job as somebody else, same job description, and you make 20% more? Inevitably, what's going to be the thought? If a person's pure-hearted, they might just say, you know what? Qadr Allah ma sha'a. And that's actually linking back to the phone. But a lot of us don't have that pure heart yet. So we might think to ourselves like, I'm way better than that person. When I was youth director at a community, a brother accidentally forwarded me an email that he left all the quotes in the bottom. Like the email has like collapsible emails underneath. And this is one of like our lead volunteers. And he emailed me, he forwarded me an email, and the only reason why I found this is I searched for something else, and so Google found it, because Google is listening right now, so they find everything. But anyway, so I searched for something and it showed this email, and I was like, I don't remember ever getting that email before. And I clicked on it, and basically there was this massive discussion between these two people about how I was a glorified babysitter, which I am. But they were like, why is he even employed in this realm? Like, he's just a glorified babysitter, like, blah, 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 blah. I think I wasn't offended by it at all, but again, these are the sort of statements that we make when we think that we're safe, and it's all in private. But when we think about it, we go home, we're by ourselves, we have to ask ourselves, like, am I jealous of this person? Right? Imam Ghazali says that jealousy and envy is actually the most destructive disease. Because, he says, it has nothing to do with the person. If I'm jealous of somebody, it actually has nothing to do with them. It has everything to do with me thinking that Allah made a mistake in His provision. Because what are you saying? When you say that someone else shouldn't have what they have, essentially what I'm saying when I say that is Allah made a mistake. You should have given that to me. Why did you give it to them? So the person has shown like ultimate displeasure with Allah's wisdom and decision making. That's why Ghazali says if a person has hasad, they actually need to totally distract themselves from the other person and instead, like the brother said, become more grateful to Allah and realize that He has wisdom. One of my really, close mentors that I've had in life, his net worth was like $60 million, right? And so he told me one time, I sat down with him, we were having lunch, and he was paying, of course. But he said, there would always be that awkward moment at the sort of like checkout. Let me pay. He's like, no, let me pay. I'm like, yeah, you should actually. There was one time where he had like a lot of cash, well, a lie has happened. It's so interesting, like people with so much money, it doesn't really mean anything to them anymore. Like, so he had a lot of hundreds. I kid you not, we went to eat lunch. The total bill was like $12. And I'm like, oh, let me pay. He goes, look, I don't even know what to do with this. Yeah, and I was like, I'm right here. You can just give it to me. Like, I can tell you what to do with it. So anyways, I asked him one time, point blank, I said, let me ask you a question for sure. I said, how do you manage like, being so wealthy? Like, how do you make relationships? How do you know that people just aren't in it to get something from you? And he said, man, I'll tell you something. It is one of the most, having this much money is one of the most difficult things. He's like, honestly, if I could, I would just trade it away for an average salary, an average job, an average life. And I was like, well, it's your lucky day because I would gladly, like you found average guy, average salary, and I always kind of wanted to be a millionaire. So anyways, he said that, and I was like, interesting, tell me why. And he goes, people don't realize how much of a test having this is. Have you ever seen ESPN 30 for 30 called Broke? Where they highlight new cases, all the guys will be on ESPN 24/7, right? They highlight the athletes that have like multi-million-dollar contracts that are now like bankrupt. And part of the reason why is because having that much wealth, we don't consider it a test, but it's actually an immense test, right? And so one thing he said to me, I'll never forget, is he said, "I'll never envy anybody." He said, because whatever Allah gave them, this isn't a scholar, by the way, this is a Muslim person who just has some wisdom. He said, because whatever somebody has, Allah didn't give it to you because He's trying to protect you from something. And whatever somebody has, Allah gave it to them because they can handle it, and you can't handle it yet. So He might give it to you later, right? He might give it to you later, and maybe then you can handle it. But He's not giving it to you now because it would destroy you. And that sat with me so strongly. Like when he said it to me, I said, SubhanAllah, how can we ever question Allah's wisdom? Like it's like when a child asks for something, you don't give it to them. Why? Because you know that it's going to hurt them. You know that it's harmful for them. We sit here and beg and pray, and then we say, why don't Allah give me this? But it's the same as a child saying, why is my parent handing me that sharp object? I asked them all day for it, they said no. And then if you ever saw a parent say, sure, here, take this Japanese like knife, right? Go run as much as you can with it. You would say that's a horrible parent. Human beings are so interesting. We beg Allah for things, and then if we get something and we hurt ourselves with it, we say it's Allah's fault. Isn't that so interesting? So there's a reason why in this about Allah we ask for Allah to give us good and to protect us from bad. Because at the end of the day, part of having that relationship with Him is trusting Him. and saying, I know that He's made the right decision with what He's given me and given other people. So when it comes to Hasad, the dangerousness of it is, it's really not between you and another person, it's between you and Allah's wisdom and decision.
So then you're saying that part of the way to remedy Hasad is for me to have an honest assessment with my condition, and maybe even tell myself that, okay, what that person has, I can't handle, which might be going against myself. That this person has been awarded this admission to whatever program, this person has such and such wealth, this person has such and such attention, that for me then, I have to think to myself, okay, I don't have it, and it's actually better for me. Like your example of the baby with the knife.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I would probably cut myself with it.
Yeah.
Okay. What would be other possible ways for me to remedy this testing?
So the scholars say, do something good for the envied. So if you envy somebody, do something good for the envied. And they say, if possible, in a way that addresses your envy of them. So somebody's getting married, you want to marry that person, or you want to get married, you're questioning why they're getting married, buy them a really nice gift for their wedding. Not like a broken gift, right? Enjoy, right? Like not like that. Someone got into a program that you wanted to get into, you didn't get in, give them a gift card, congratulating them. Right? Take them out for dinner, congratulating them. Okay? Not at a place that you know is going to give them food poisoning, right? But actually congratulate them. The scholars say that this is a way to do what is the next remedy, which is stand in direct opposition of your envy. You know, there are some diseases where the treatment, there's some like cool little hacks. So the scholars will say, oh, if you want to, fight desire, then fast. You're like, oh, cool, it's a nice little sort of hidden hack. Like, oh, if I fast, then I'll be more focused on what I have to do, I'll be more exhausted, I won't have as much desire. They say envy, there's a couple hacks, but really it's just standing in front of yourself and saying, no, stop it. Right? And there are some things in life where you just have to say, no, but then stop. Right? I can distract myself for so long, but when it comes down to it, and I'm being overwhelmed by something, I just have to almost look at myself in the mirror and say, what are you doing with yourself? Right? And I liken a lot of spirituality and purification of the heart to like diet. Because a lot of times, like taking care of your body and taking care of your mind and taking care of your eating and all these things, they're very similar. They have a lot of analogy. And one of the things is that you can come up with different sort of like, oh, I'm going to eat like spaghetti squash instead of spaghetti, or I'm going to like have like whole grain rice instead of rice. Sometimes you just can say, no, I'm not going to have it. Right? I'm going to have brown sugar instead of sugar. No, you just don't need to have sugar anymore. Right? So there are some things where you can just tell yourself, no, stop. And I'll tell you honestly, wallahi, like for the short amount of time that I've been able to do anything in my life successful, it's always been at the end of me being very disciplined myself. Think about Ramadan. Do a lot of you feel like a boost in your faith in Ramadan? Yeah, right? Even if it's because maybe it's just the environment. But what is Ramadan really a month of? It's a month of discipline. It's a month of telling yourself, no, you can't eat. No, you can't drink. Yeah, you do have to wake up and pray in the morning. Yeah, you should stay up late and pray or read some Quran or do something good, right? At the end of that month of discipline, there's what? There's an Eid, a celebration. Why? Because when a person is disciplined and they conquer themselves and they reach new levels of spiritual height, then that's the time to celebrate, right? So one of the workarounds or remedies for Hasad is just to kind of look at yourself and say, no, you are having this issue, you have to stop, right? Doing something good for the envy, standing in front of yourself. The other one, like we said, is to sort of reflect about why you don't have it. So a lot of times when we envy somebody, we think of all the reasons why we should have it. Scholars say think of all the reasons why you shouldn't have it, right? Maybe there's something inside of you that's deficient that would cause you to really do something bad. Or maybe there was something previously that you maybe made a mistake or did something wrong, and that person didn't do that mistake and they've earned it. Or maybe you wronged that person in some way, and this is Allah rewarding them for being patient with how you wronged them, right? There's so many different levels. So instead of focusing on, oh, I should have it, this is why I should have it, the scholars say, take a minute to just think about maybe one of the reasons why you don't have it, right? And instead of being like, almost like pining for it, that'll motivate you instead to say, what? Okay, I need to fix myself before I get this thing, right? A lot of times in parenting or in classrooms, teachers do this. You don't have recess today. Why? Because you made a mistake. But if you act well tomorrow, then maybe you'll have it then, right? So it's the same thing, right? There might be a reason why we didn't earn it. If, inshallah, we rectify and remedy ourselves in our spiritual state, then maybe Allah Ta'ala will present us with something similar, or if not, that same thing. Yeah.
So these are some really, really important points to consider. But I want to pause for a second. All of you, I'm sure, attended dozens, perhaps hundreds of such talks. And the real question then becomes implementation, right? I mean, you come, attend the talk, and leave, and think, yeah, I can do this, I can do this. But if it's not happening, if I'm not putting it into practice, then all you got here were a bunch of really good samosas. And then you got just when they're gone, right? So having said that, suppose someone says, okay, yeah, I get it, that enemy's bad, but why should I care? Everything's bad. Okay. It's baffling.
So,
right.
I'm just trying to think how to structure it.
And while he's processing this,
It's okay. You're talking about
no,
the way the factory operates sort of doesn't
while Rahman is processing that point, we'll also open the floor for questions. Are people writing them down?
So we'll collect them if anyone
So there's two things I'll say to that. The first is a very real one, and I try to avoid giving these as like reasons because this is kind of what we've been told our entire lives, and to some degree everyone's like, okay, I get it. But the Prophet Muhammad did say in a hadith that's authentic that envy destroys a person's good deeds like fire destroys dry wood. So all of those good deeds that you've ever done in your life, they're all vulnerable to this one disease called envy. And what's interesting is that those good deeds might have nothing to do with envy of that person, but they're all susceptible to being destroyed because of envy. So the reality is that all the good deeds that we sort of acquired and sort of saved up, they could be being burned down from the bottom, right? Now the reason why I don't like to use that as a primary one is because I feel like we've been like scared to death, to the point where we've been scared to apathy in our community. Like, oh, you're gonna go to hellfire, you're gonna lose your good deeds. And at some point people are just like, okay, like I don't even know, you know? The more poignant reason for me is what Imam Hasad said, which is that a person who is envious is questioning Allah's decision and is standing and challenging Allah's decision. And that, whenever you question or challenge or criticize something in that way, in that manner, it's a sign of a poor relationship. And there's no one that I want to have a poor relationship with. There's no way that I want to have a poor relationship with Allah. Like, after everything He's done for me, after all the countless blessings that He will continue to do for us, the last thing I want is to communicate to Allah in any way that I'm displeased with Him.
So put these two points together. The first point is that we all get that envy is bad, but related to the example that AbdelRahman gave, think seriously about how detrimental and destructive it is. So to put that into practice, what are we saying? That if it's going to destroy all your good deeds, it means it's going to destroy all your relationships. So you might have envy against this one person because it's something in your heart. It's going to seep into all your relationships. It'll spoil everything. And so one aspect is to seriously think of what envy does to me as a person. It darkens everything. And the bigger aspect, which much will give really attention to, the real thing that gets lost is your relationship with Allah. I mean, if you have no relationship with Allah, you're lost completely. But if that isn't hitting in terms of seriousness, start with the first point, which is you're going to lose everything.
There's actually a very interesting book called The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. Have you guys ever read that? That book is literally the purification of the heart. You guys know the story? I read it. Spoiler alert. So Kylo Ren dies. I'm kidding. So I got it right. It's just, I'm just a love at Slulos. No, so The Picture of Dorian Gray is actually one of my favorite stories. I think, has it been turned into a movie yet? It'd be really good for a movie. You should get Leo play it. Love her. You want to find So, Picture of Dorian Gray basically is a story about a young man who's extremely good looking. That's just me actually. I don't think it's good looking, not projecting. So, Dorian Gray, he's extremely good looking, extremely handsome, very popular guy. And what ends up happening is there's this artist in town, and the artist artist says that I have this magical ability to preserve somebody's looks by painting them with a certain canvas and paint. So Dorian Gray, obviously, like any of us, thought he would use it to discover it, now he wants to maintain his image, and so he gets painted by this guy. Now, he goes from being like a really well-loved person in society to now, because he has this sort of immortal youth, he ends up being really rude and airy to people and hurting relationships and being very like just abrasive. And over time, he starts losing his friends and he starts losing his social standing in the community. But in order to remind himself of how amazing he is, he wants to go back and just gaze at his picture and look at his portrait, right? So he's told by people like, you're such a rude person, you're such a horrible individual. And instead of dealing with his reality, he says, I'm just going to go back to my portrait because I need to go stare at myself and realize I'm beautiful. But what's interesting is that every time he goes back, he notices that the picture gets uglier and uglier. So first he goes back and there's like a crooked nose, right? He's like, what? I didn't know I was going to listen, right? He's like, okay, it's fine. You guys are like this mirror? So he's like, I didn't know that was there. And then he goes back the next time, there's like a scar, like a massive boil on his head. There's all these little things that are being added, and finally they accumulate. And towards the end of the book, he finally realizes, when he goes back the final time, after breaking all these relationships, the figure is completely just disfigured. The face is completely disfigured. And this, the notion, the story he's trying to communicate basically is that this was his internal. What he was looking at was an internal mirror, an internal view into his heart. And so when it comes to things like Hasad, it seems like a very external behavior. Envy seems like a very external behavior. Well, I don't like being around this person because I envy them, or I start questioning, but all of it goes back to the internal. And what we don't realize is that the internal can be sensed by other people, right? Does anyone want to be friends with an envious person? Do you want to be friends with someone backwards? My sister-in-law is really funny. It's a funny story. There's a group of three girls. My sister-in-law and her two friends. And I noticed that whenever they were together, whenever two of them were together, the third one became a topic of conversation. Right? They were what we call frenemies. Okay, so sister-in-law, girl A, sister-in-law, girl B. So girl A and her would talk about girl B. Then girl A would leave, girl B would come over, and they would talk about girl A. So one day I just kind of went, and I was like, I'm not going to like preach to her, but I'm just going to kind of like ask her, like, what's her relationship like with these girls? And she's like, yeah, I like them, but I kind of hate them too. I don't know, it's kind of weird. I was like, yeah, you're right, it is very weird actually. And she said, yeah, I said, you guys you realize that when you're together, you talk about the other person, right? She was, yeah, but it's just whatever. This is just how it is. And I said, well, what do you think those two talk about when they're together? Ooh. She goes, oh my God. Right? And that's the realization, is that these diseases have very real effects on relationships. So the first and highest level of disappointment is going to be when a person realizes that all of these diseases distance them from their creator, right? But if that's not motivating enough, or if that's not just like hitting a spot, then realize, like Professor Omer said, okay, they'll distance you from Allah, but in the meanwhile, they'll also distance you from those that you love. And you might get frustrated with those you love every once in a while, but is it really worth losing your relationship with them? Everything that can be gained for one moment of envy or frustration or anger or disappointment? No. And so the real, scariness of envy is that, it manifests itself in the destruction of a person's life. They cannot be around anybody without looking at what they have and evaluating it and being critical of it. It consumes a person, right? And actually, the interesting word the Prophet, when he used that word, he actually didn't say it burns their good deeds, it consumes their good deeds. So the idea of consumption, of being completely overwhelmed by something, is communicated even in that hadith. That a person will no longer be able to be friends with someone, or have a relationship, I should say, with someone, except that they will be the subject of envy. Right? It's so weird. It's such a strange dynamic. These diseases have a very interesting way of becoming, enlarged.
Okay, so let's answer some of these questions. What do you do if someone is jealous of you? What do you answer that?
First of all, you really need to get over yourself. Okay, this is a serious question, but in all honesty, don't be that person, okay? Because everyone's just so jealous of me. Because that vibe will also sort of like, in a weird way, become like a sort of like placebo effect. Like it'll actually increase people's capacity to be jealous of you because they're like, why are they always praising themselves, et cetera, et cetera. But there are methods that we take as Muslims to protect ourselves from being envied. Alright? And number one is that in this age of social media where everything is public, everything's online, don't celebrate yourself all the time. Okay? Because the reality of social media or the reality of any relationship is that you're only giving people like this big of a window into your life. And so if all you put in front of this window is like success, amazing, wow, this is awesome, cool, have a nice day, right? Then when people are hitting their tough times, they're gonna look at that little window and be, wow, this person literally never has any of the struggles that I have. But even though that's a wrong perception because you have like 99% of other things happening in your life that could be struggles, it's kind of your fault because it's kind of all you're putting out there. Now, I'm not saying you walk around and you be like, you know, what's the character for Linus, the one's that always think about it. Don't be like Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I'm just having this is all like horrible. None of you get this. Don't be a sad person, okay? And then just say my life is horrible all the time. But in reality, be someone who is even keeled with your emotional state in public. Don't be someone that's just like, yeah, no, that's amazing. High five me. Everyone, let's come celebrate my experiences, my successes. No. Be someone who is saying, alhamdulillah, I have certain things, alhamdulillah, I have certain challenges, and be even keel. The other thing I would say is always, whenever something good does happen to you in front of people, or it's sort of like a public thing, never ever be like, yeah, it's because of me. Always give credit back to Allah. Why? What's the core of envy again? Disagreeing with who? Who? Allah. So if you give credit back to Allah, you're reminding yourself and everybody in that room that, hey, this isn't because of me. This is because of Allah. Don't envy me. There's no reason to envy me. This is because of Allah Ta'ala, it's His decision. I got to do a certain program, I got married, I earned a certain job, I got this. I'm just thankful that Allah gave me this opportunity. I don't know what I did to get it. Allah's giving me this, I hope I pass the test. Imagine saying that versus like, yeah, I studied really hard, but I'm kind of amazing, and alhamdulillah, it's just awesome. Like, instead of going that route, if you just go all focus on Allah being generous, then a person would have a very difficult time articulating envy in that situation. Because it would literally be a very clear standing against Allah subhanahu decision.
Okay, so then related to that, this question, I'm going to read it, I'm also going to modify it to build on what you just said. How should you deal with people who are always secretive to an unhealthy degree because they are afraid of Hasad? So I'm going to rephrase this by saying, how much should a person be afraid of Hasad? And then how should we deal with people?
What's interesting is that when the Prophet talks about the dangers of Hasad, he talks about being the muhsid, being the one who envies. He's not talking about being envied. You know what I'm talking about? Our community is obsessed with the dangers of being envied. We're like, oh, don't be envied. The Prophet said, don't envy people, right? And Allah is more powerful than envy, believe it or not. Allah is more powerful than envy. When I say that, actually, we talk about like jinn. People are scared of jinn. Like, don't worry, Allah's more powerful than jinn. They're like, He is. And it's like, yes, right? So if you anchor yourself to Allah and do the things that Allah and His Messenger told us to do, for example, saying MashaAllah when Allah gives us certain things, reading ayatul kursi on certain things, making our dua in the morning, being humble people in general. If we have these practices and they sort of become inculcated in our life, then we don't have to really fear anything. Because why? We anchor ourselves to Allah. And we basically put that on Allah. That, oh Allah, I'm going to anchor myself to you. I'm going to trust that even if someone does have these sort of maybe envious traits, it's not going to impact me. But the point I want to make in this question is, we have become almost debilitatingly obsessed with being envied, but we have totally skirted the discussion about the destruction of being the envier. And that's actually what the Prophet talks about when he warns us against envy, is don't envy people because it's going to destroy you. So I would say if someone is having this issue, if you're having it yourself, then like I said, anchor yourself to Allah. If it's a friend of yours, then there's really no benefit in pushing someone out of their comfort zone. I would just operate within whatever comfort zone they're giving you. It's probably something that they grew up with, something that's culturally, taught to them, et cetera, et cetera. If Egyptians are very intense about this kind of stuff, so I can totally vibe with exactly what this question is referring to. But at the same time, that might just be where that person's comfortable. So you just gotta kind of operate in that zone. Right? And remind them that, Allah Ta'ala can take care of all of their, if they're concerned or worried about things, Allah can take care of that, inshallah.
So I'm going to read the whole card, but I want to focus on the second question. What must one do if he or she is the victim of Hasad? And then the second question is, how do you become the well-wisher for someone who surpasses you instead of wishing you were in their place? You sort of answer this, can you give any other thoughts?
How do you become the
well-wisher for someone who surpasses you?
That's the thing, is you can't see it as surpassing, right? Because that's sort of almost painting life as like this giant scantron, and then like, depending on how you do, is like an objective test. No, life is not a scantron as much as you guys are all like science majors and math majors. Life is more of like an essay. Allah Ta'ala will judge you each individually based on your circumstances and your responses to your circumstances. So when someone gets something that you haven't gotten, or won't get, frankly, if it never happens, that's not an indication. We're not Calvinists. Okay, we don't believe that Allah's love is articulated by His giving us wealth and material. We believe that Allah is giving us what we need and what we deserve, right? And even more than that, sometimes we deserve, and that we are going to be tested based on the materials Allah has given us. We can't always be comparing ourselves to other people, because again, that could be Allah saving you from being asked about those things. Who are the first people to go to heaven?
The prophets.
Okay, after the 6 categories. The first people, the poor. Why? Why are the poor people the first people to go to heaven? They have the least to be asked about. Yeah, very good. Like, Allah's going to ask us about every single penny that we spend. So if you didn't have very much to begin with, well, your list of questions is pretty short. So if Allah hasn't given you something that's like He's given to someone else, one way to see it is, hey, that's one thing I don't got to answer about. Right? So understand that your relationship with Allah is unique, is individual, right? It's not one that, oh, Allah's going to measure me up against this person. That's not how Islam is. So one way to sort of get over that sort of envy of someone else, quote unquote, surpassing you, is to realize that you are two very different people with two very different relationships with Allah, right?
Okay, then from there, what if you or someone close to you makes envious remarks about someone else, or has a habit of these envious remarks, like saying, oh, he or she probably got a better program because there weren't many applicants. How should you go about talking to that person? So you're in company with someone who's envious.
Yeah, one of the rules of being around people who say things like this that my teachers taught me is that always respond to criticism with praise. So if you're in a gathering and someone says something bad about somebody, be the person that says something good about them. And there's 2 things that will happen. Number 1 is that person will instantly get the hint, right? So someone's like, oh, that person, they just got lucky. You're like, no, actually, one time, mashallah, I was studying them, they're actually really smart. That person will get the hint like, oh my God, I'm a jerk, right? Or they'll keep going and it'll just get awkward for them. So they're like, no, I don't think so. And you're like, no, I do think so, right? And you just kind of go back and forth. And then what happens is it becomes more and more apparent that this is not a behavior that's socially acceptable. So in that way, you're actually teaching people. So this actually happened in the time of prophets a long time, right? What happened was Abdullah bin Mas'ud, okay, the bastion of the Hanafi method. Abdullah bin Mas'ud, he was climbing a tree. He had like impeccable tree climbing skills, and he was in Medina, and he was getting dates for the companions and people. So as he was climbing the tree, his izad or lungi, his waistcloth lifted up a little bit, and his legs began to show. And he had particularly skinny legs, okay? So I want you to imagine the scene. All the companions are sitting with the Prophet ﷺ in this garden. There's a bunch of trees, there's some dates hanging. Abdullah bin Mas'ud is like, I'm gonna go get some dates. He climbs, his legs start to show. The companions, in response to this, start saying, look at his legs, look at how skinny they are, right? This sounds like a very typical conversation that we would have. Maybe not about someone's legs, but we would start to criticize. Oh, look at this person, they can't jump very high, they run so funny, they walk awkwardly, all these things that we say about people, right? May Allah forgive us. And so the Prophet ﷺ, instead of actually even addressing the criticism, he actually takes the criticism or the point of criticism and he turns it into something beautiful. So instead of saying, why are you saying that? Because that can embarrass that person, right? He says, actually, so they start saying this person's legs are skinny. He says, actually, those legs in the sight of Allah are heavier than the mountains of Uhud. Like in the scale of Allah, the scale of good deeds, are heavier than the mountains of Uhud. Any of you ever been to Uhud before? When you go, look at it again. The hadith has completely meaning when you see it now. So he took that criticism and turned it into praise. So if you're in the gathering with somebody who's like exhibiting these symptoms of envy or backbiting, then be the person who replaces the bad with good. And see what that does to the dynamic of the situation. You'll also be educating people on how to respond to that, because that's a very awkward situation that a lot of us have been in and we don't know how to respond. Right? So when you exemplify that, it actually becomes a very good model for other people to follow.
Good. Yeah. And we're running in advance. We have just a few more questions. What advice do you have to stop backbiting? So similar to what you mentioned, and I'll keep reading. Especially when you're in a company with someone who gossips a lot, it sometimes gets hard to start a conversation without mentioning names.
That might be one of those things where you just have to stop. You just have to stop doing it. My brother's actually really good at this. He'll just say, hey, stop talking about that person. And I'm like, wow, he did it. He called me out. Right? Like, and no, really, like, honestly speaking, whenever we fall into this sort of habit, and people, we come up with all sorts of justifications and rationales for why we backbiting. Oh, I heard that it's okay if the person walks in public 25 miles or like some random thing that we quote. It's like, no, like, what is the goal? And here's essentially what I come to is that, is your conversation about someone coming from a place of love or a place of hate? If it's coming from a place of love, then fair. Hopefully there's some sort of benefit coming from it. Because you're not backbiting for the sake of, I'm destroying this person. You're seeking some sort of aid, or you're maybe constructively criticizing what they've done in an attempt to come up with some sort of solution for the issue. Because it's coming from a place of love. But most of us, when we involve ourselves in conversations about people, it's coming from a place of dislike or disdain or even hatred. If that is the source of it, believe you me, nothing good will come from that. Nothing good comes from a source of conversation that's hatred, nothing. And good things only come from a conversation where the source is love. I sincerely love this person, I want to help this time. I want to help make them better. So one of the ways that we stop backbiting is to assess where it's coming from. Where's the source? Right? Just like our drinking water. We assess the source. We don't drink water from a sewer. We drink water from, unless you have treatment plants, but we drink water from pure sources. We assess the source. The other thing is that realize every single moment in your life that you've done something wrong, and you wish and hope that people would not talk about you. And as you're in that moment of talking about somebody else, realize that there are people who could definitely talk about you in the same way. And as the maxim says, commands will be to them. What you have done to others will be done to you, right? So we believe this. And the last that the Prophet said in that hadith, very scary premonition. He said that a person who criticizes or mocks somebody else for doing something, that person will not die until they've done the same thing. So if I mock somebody else or insult them for making a mistake or doing something, then I basically set myself up that I will not pass away. Allah Ta'ala, this is the promise from the Prophet, that Allah Ta'ala will open doors for me in that way that I've done the same mistake that I was just criticizing. Right? Maybe then, maybe later, but it'll happen. Unless the person makes, obviously, tawbah if that's for it. So these things should be enough to sort of rattle us and wake us up from being in that state. Right? Along with, obviously, the immense amount of bad deeds that are accompanied with it. But the reason why I'm not focusing on bad deeds goes back to the beginning of the talk, which is the spiritual ramifications. And it doesn't matter, deeds, yes or no. At the end of the day, the spirituality of this all is what's going to dictate the good or bad. So,
one of the hardest things for me is being too preoccupied with the future and what will happen, i.e. obsessed with marriage. That it's hard to focus on my present. Anything for focusing on your present self.
and it's a long answer. I'm going to give you 3 things. Ready? Number 1. Think about all the times in your past that you had no idea what was going to come out of the situation and how Allah delivered you through those situations. Then remind yourself that in the future, you don't know what's going to happen, but Allah, just like He did before, will deliver you through those situations. Okay? Number 2. Focus on the now, because the now, the quality of the now, I should say, will dictate the quality of the future. A lot of people are preoccupied, especially in marriage, with who I'm going to marry and are less concerned about who I am when I get married. But they don't realize that who I am when I get married can end my relationship with who I'm going to marry if I haven't put work into it. So focusing on the future, although it's very romantic and very nice, and I mean romantic in a general sense, like where am I going to live? Am I going to live in Europe? Am I going to travel abroad? Am I going to do this? All those things are great, but in reality, neglecting the now is going to impact your chances for that then, right? And the third thing, and final thing, is that this kind of overwhelming thought about the future is also considered a tactic of shaitan. Because shaitan wants us to focus on things that aren't immediately practical. He gets us concerned about things that he whispers, right? And gets us concerned about things that aren't immediately applicable. And you see this a lot when it comes to like theoretical discussions, big picture discussions. Like, what are the discussions that happen at Muslim gatherings? Talk about like politics, right? That's like the whole stereotype of like, Muslim about politics. Meanwhile, like, we're sitting there and Isha is just flowing on by. You know what's interesting in Surah Baqarah, if you've ever taken his Quran worldview class? One thing that I realized as I was reading it and teaching it is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tells Bani Israel in like verses number like 30, mid-30s to early 40s, he gives them like a bunch of theoretical points. You know, believe in this book, it's what we've sent down, don't be the first to disbelieve. A bunch of theological points. And then he says, establish prayer, give zakat, and I will those do well. He goes from theoretical to practical. Why? Because you can get lost in the land of theory all day. You can sit there and talk and do intellectual gymnastics and say, well, I think this and I think that. But if you're not immediately applying yourself, none of that theory matters. Right? And this is actually what also is true in like other realms of life. You can sit and talk about the state of academia and the state of the world, but if you're not actually working to achieve something and make a difference and apply yourself, then all of your conversations are just hot air. It's the same with thinking about the future and the present. You can think about the future all you want, but if you're not applying yourself now, right, Shaitan wants you to stay over here. He doesn't want you to fix yourself now, he wants you to fix yourself later, right? So bring yourself down, drag your mind back down to the present as a way to sort of get over that obsession.
Okay, that is a good segue to our final question. But our second to last question, you are half Egyptian, half what? Because I'm also half Egyptian.
Not a good reason. Because I'm also half Egyptian, so you know we're brothers. Half Egyptian, half Irish American. True story, I had corned beef, didn't I? This is like Irish thing. It's like Irish and Ari without the sauce. Okay, think about it. Get back to me. Think about it. Get back to me.
Okay, so your last point is leading to this. How do you take the first step or choose where to start when you know something is lacking and your heart isn't driven by your rituals or by just rituals alone? So essentially, give everybody the first step.
So the story of Omar ibn Khattab is one of my favorite stories because it very practically articulates what a person is supposed to do in their heart when they realize that their heart is deficient, which is who? All of us. Very good, everybody, okay? So all of our hearts are deficient. We have to realize that. The minute you think, oh, I'm good, now you're bad, okay? Same here, everybody, right? This is the truth of the matter. Omar ibn Khattab, on his way to kill the Prophet ﷺ. By the way, not to kill the Prophet because he didn't like Islam. That actually was not the reason. The reason why was because he was a patriot. Think of him like a Donald Trump supporter, okay? So he was, well, not good. You guys aren't supporters. Okay, so he was a patriot. He considered himself a patriot. And he saw the Prophet's message as anarchist, right? So he said, this guy is ruining our community. So I want to fix that. So he actually had a very noble intention, which, little segue here, it's important when we see people who have very interesting political views that are somewhat, could be interpreted as bigoted, whether it's racist, whether it's sexist, whether it's this, to not just look at the outer manifestations, but to look at the core of it. Because sometimes, the way that they view things are number one, the only way they've ever seen things. Because my uncle, for example, my dad's brother was voting for Donald Trump. It's very easy to get upset at that, but I have to see where they're coming from. They're from Springfield, Illinois. Anyone from Springfield? Exactly, there's only corn in Springfield, okay? So there's no people there. So I have to see that, and I have to be able to work within that confines. I've heard so many stories of people who are like, that person's racist. You know, it's not my job to teach them. Yeah, it is. Imagine the Prophet said it's not my job to teach them. What happened? What happened when Musa said it's not my job to teach them? Swallowed by a whale. It is your job to teach them. Someone has a bigoted, completely backwards, stupid view of the world. You don't walk away from that. And you don't say, oh, it's not my job to teach them. Of course it's your job to teach them. In a way that's compassionate, in a way that evokes empathy and evokes goodness. So Umar ibn Khattab, on the way to the Prophet, he then gets redirected to his sister's house. A person says, you're going to kill the Prophet? Your own sister was so why don't you do your family first, bro? So then he goes to his sister, it's not actually what happened. He goes to his sister's house, okay? Oh, come on. So he goes to his sister's house, okay? And his sister is reading Quran with her husband and their teacher comes up. He goes, knocks on the door, he busts through, what are you reading? Show him what you're reading. And in a fit of rage because he's being denied, he slaps his sister, punches or slaps, there's whole different versions. Punches or slaps his sister, causes her to bleed. When he sees this image of what he's become, and this is why I said, the scariest part of the purification of heart is when you see what you've become. When you see who you are, right? Or I like to call it our Harvey Dent moment, right? Because why? Because on one side you're completely normal, and on the other side there's a real opening. I mean, no pun intended. There's a real revelation. So Omar sees in that moment what he's become, the level he's stooped to. That I would hit my own sister in the face. I would hit my own sister in the face because of an intellectual disagreement. I would strike her and cause her to bleed. The first thing he did was, he said, can I please read that? So what's the first thing that we have to do? Education, but we have to attach ourselves to the Quran. And what I mean that is not to read it in Arabic necessarily, unless that's the one that you understand or attach to most, but I mean develop a relationship with the Quran. Don't just read it. Have a relationship with it. Right? And mashallah, your chaplain is like one of the anchors of a lot of people's relationship with the Quran. May Allah increase inshallah. Right? He's one of the anchors for a lot of people in their relationship. So if you have a question, how do I develop a relationship with the Quran? Guess what? What's your office? David 2:17. David 2:17. Where you go, inshallah, okay? So he says, let me read that. His sister says, no, you gotta wash up first. This is only for pure people. So he goes and washes up and he reads. What does the book say to him? SubhanAllah. What did he think the problem was with the sun? What was the issue? Did he not like the sun? What did he not like about it? It was causing societal issues, right? What did Allah say? Oh, Allah, this book is not meant to cause difficulty. Isn't that interesting? He said this book is causing so much difficulty. And Allah, the first verse that he reads says, this book was not revealed to cause difficulty. Right? Answers his direct concern about this book. Then he attaches his relationship with the Quran. Then what does he say? Take me to the house of the Prophet. He runs to the house of the Prophet. What do we do when we realize the deficiency? Relationship with the Quran. Run to the example of the Prophet. How did he do things? Because I want to do it just like that. Right? Growing up in Chicago in the 90s, kids would jump from the free throw line with their tongues hanging out of their mouth in this position, copying who? Michael Jordan, Hafidhullah, right? And they would land 2.5 feet in front of themselves when they jump, but it didn't matter because they want to be like Mike, right? Now, everyone in the city is tearing their ACLs. Actually, torn my left ACL, right? In honor of Derek Rose. So, true story. The point is that when you really love somebody, you aspire to be like them. Ahmed in that moment ran to the Prophet Muhammad. He comes to the Prophet Muhammad's house and he says to him, I believe in what you brought. And instantly becomes super focused on doing things right. Okay, so the 3 steps. Number 1, relationship with the Quran. Number 2, relationship with the example of the Prophet. Number 3 is you become very focused on doing things right and not giving yourself concessions. Omar didn't go from converting to, I'm going to go have I'm going to go out and drink tonight, right? I'm going to go back to my old way. No. He became super focused on doing things right. You realize, and I realize that we have deficiencies, Quran, example of the Prophet, and work hard. Work hard and getting better. That's what Allah to be successful, inshallah.
Me.
Just want to thank everybody before we shall get to the conclusion for having me here tonight. I know it's Wednesday, you guys have a lot to do. I don't know if in terms of now or later or whatever, but inshallah, Allah gives us all the ability to work on these things and become better and closer to Him and purify our hearts